Hi, and welcome to my podcast, Pregnant in Japan, your podcast about pregnancy, birth, and the joy of a relaxed motherhood in Japan. My name is Vicky. I'm a German mom living in Tokyo. I'm sharing my positive birth experience to inspire you with yours.
Today we have Alice Nakae, originally from Australia, and she lives now since 5 years already in Japan. And she gave birth to her daughter Melody last fall in Iryo Center in Tokyo. She will share with us her birth story today and also how she advocated for herself at the hospital and emphasizing what was important for her and how she handled the Japanese authoritarian doctors. Hi, Alice. Welcome to the Pregnant in Japan podcast. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me on here.
Yeah. Alice, before we start, I would like to ask you two unconventional questions. The first one is, I know you have been for a while in Japan. So what is one of the places you like to travel the most to in Japan?
Well, I have a couple of favorite places because I'm more of the nature side of things. So while I live in Tokyo, I actually prefer to visit places like Mount Fuji and the Ikutsukushima Jinja, the shrine in Miyajima. And also there's a little a small mountain called Takao-san, which is easily within a day's train ride from where I live. So they're probably my favorite spots at the moment.
Good to know some insider tips. Oh, I will look into it.
Definitely, I would recommend.
And the second question is there an event in your life that was an eye-opener for you? Very specific question, I think. Sorry.
No, not at all. It's an eye-opener. It's a hard question. So I would probably, rather than something that was, I guess, an eye-opener, it's more of just a glad decision that I made was when I was working in a company in Australia, and I just had this feeling that I wanted to go to Japan again. And instead of, saying, oh, I'll go one day or something, I just quit my job in Australia and bought a ticket to Japan, and I was in Japan by May of that year. So, and I haven't been back since. So definitely a good decision, I think.
Oh, right. Love it. So sometimes it's just good to follow your feeling and also to make radical changes, to try something new.
Yeah, exactly.
It's probably scaring at the beginning, right?
Yeah, I mean, how do you know? My parents were like, "Are you sure? Are you ready?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm going to go, and I'm just going to work it out as I go."
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, I want to start with the question about the Iryo Center, Tokyo Iryo Center. So, what was the reason why you picked this hospital?
When we were talking about hospitals, I was originally looking at clinics and other places, but my husband works actually at the Iryo Center, and that was a big thing for me because I wanted to make sure that he could be there at any point, if it was during the labor, if I had a long labor or anything, labor and birth, I wanted him to be there. And the best possibility for that was if I was at his hospital. So that's why we decided there. And it's the closest place to our house. So it only takes, 2 minutes to drive.
Wow, good. So nice that he's working there, and it was very close. Other than that he could be there and also that it was close to your house, was there something else that was really important for you when looking for a hospital?
It was kind of because I wanted to be at home as much as possible, and sort of have a place that was so close was a big thing. And also to have, I mean, with obviously COVID restrictions, it was unfortunate that my husband wasn't allowed to be in the labor and delivery room with me anyway, even though that was the biggest reason why I chose that hospital. But, it was kind of, I was going through debating what they offered and but the ultimate thing was just to have my husband close by and also have the hospital close to my house. So that's why we chose it, really.
I feel it. That's why I also changed last minute hospital too. So just my husband could be there and attend. I totally get it. So important.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this a hospital? Because I think for foreigners it's not that known. Do they speak English, or you probably speak Japanese when you live here for a while?
Well, as far as I know, they don't speak English, or not much anyway, like basic highs and stuff like that. But I do speak Japanese, so that wasn't an issue for me. When I was looking for a hospital, I didn't have to look for an English-speaking staff. So, it wasn't really an issue. I just spoke Japanese with them and they were happy with that. So the hospital doesn't offer an epidural, but I didn't want one, so it wasn't an issue. But I had thought about having it before I got pregnant. I was like, oh, I'm sure I would like an epidural because, everybody says that it hurts and, it's just easier to get an epidural. So that's what I was thinking. But once I finally got pregnant and I started researching things about it and educating myself more about, my body and pregnancy and birth and everything and all the interventions that are possible in this day and age, I just realized that, I don't think I would need an epidural. I wanted to do it without one. And so it wasn't, that wasn't on my criteria list to have something that, was a must be for the hospital or anything.
Yes, totally agree. So I also think educating yourself is quite the key. What did you do for educating yourself or for getting ready for giving birth?
Well, I absolutely loved the experience. So I was, was reading books. I downloaded audiobooks. I was watching hundreds of YouTube videos. And, there were so many that I liked of other people's birth stories and experiences, how theirs went. But I found really good ones on YouTube. There were these two YouTube channels that I particularly liked, which was Bundle Birth by a lady called Sarah Levon. And she's in LA, so not in Japan. And Bridget Taylor, who is also based in the US as well. But they both have really good YouTube channels. And obviously, if you're in the US, you can use them. But if you're in a place like, Japan, I still think their videos provide a lot of good information that you can just use at home. And I kind of would always listen to audiobooks while I was, cleaning and doing things around the house as well. So it was just, prepping your mind to know what's coming, and not just for pregnancy, but also for the first couple of months after birth as well.
Amazing, amazing. Love it. Yeah, and it's totally with internet. I mean, it's okay if we are in the US, in LA or wherever, It's the information you get, and you get so much information. For free now. You just have to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I also, I basically did the same things like you did, audiobooks and books and also the YouTube videos. And I also watch Bridget Taylor a lot. I liked her. Okay, talking about the facility again. How early did you book the facility? And did you feel, because often we hear you have to book it early here in Japan, was it the same in your case?
I have heard that you have to book early as well, but what happened for me was I got pregnant with IVF actually, and then so I was at an IVF clinic, and then all of my first ultrasounds and everything were there, and then they sort of transferred me over to my preferred hospital. So I told them what hospital I wanted to go to, and then they gave them all the information and things. So when I transferred over, which was around week 11, that's when I had to book, or they recommended that I booked a bed in their ward. So I filled out all the paperwork then, and they would have, if it weren't for COVID, they would have had a bit more of a what do you call them? Like a explanation session or something of how the hospital runs things. But because of COVID, they had to cancel it. But so that was when I filled out all the paperwork and booked the facility.
Okay, good. And may I ask you, you mentioned the IVF. I don't know a whole lot about it, especially here in Japan. What does the procedure look like, or is it actually difficult? Does it take a long time? Would you share with us a few information?
Yeah, sure. So I actually think that I've never been to a clinic of it in my own country in Australia, so I can't really compare the two. But in Japan, I found that it's quite, um, very straightforward. And obviously, depending on your situation, whether you can get pregnant, using the injections, or whether you actually just need to have the egg removed, and how far in the stages you need to go. But for me, it took about a year before I actually got pregnant. And the clinic I went to, probably it was quite a frequency that I went to the clinic for my injections to make the eggs grow for me. So I needed to go, I think it was once every second day for 2 weeks every month. And then towards the end, I could take the injections home and do it at home, which I actually got my husband to do it because I can't inject myself with a needle. That's impossible. But obviously he's a doctor, he's used to it, so I just left it up to him. But yeah, so it does involve quite a lot of going to and from the clinic often. And they do have like sets of, I was going to say it in Japanese then, they do have sessions that explain their process in Japan as well, but it's given in Japanese, not in English, or at least for the clinic that I went to, which is, the clinic I went to is not too far from here. It's about a 20-minute bike ride, 15-20-minute bike ride. Yeah.
What's the name of the clinic?
Oh, it's called Sangenjia Women's Clinic.
That's right about where I live.
Oh, so it'd be really close to you.
Too bad I didn't know you at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Okay. And you said it took a year. So it took a year the moment you entered that clinic, right? Until you
Yes.
get. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm very curious. I could ask you probably 10 more questions, but maybe in another episode. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to your hospital. The checkups at the hospital, because I have been in quite few different places here in Japan, at different places, meaning hospitals. And I noticed that usually at the hospitals, there are always different doctors doing the checkups. Was it the same case for you? Maybe you could also tell us a little bit about the atmosphere there, if a doctor was very open to listen to you and answer your questions.
Right, yeah. I did have the same doctor for all of my checkups, but it was sort of, he was the last stop in the process, if that makes sense. So what would happen was the nurses and the midwives were the ones that would do most of the checkups first. So obviously every time I would go there, I'd have to weigh myself, check your blood, give you the, what do they call that thing?
The pressure.
Pressure. Yeah, blood pressure. Yeah, that's it. And so they would, and in Japan, you know how you have that pregnancy booklet where they write everything down. So they would check that, and then they would check the baby's heartbeat, and then at the very end of all of that, with the midwives and the nurses, then I would go to the doctor, and he would sort of look at his computer of all of the details and the facts, and just be like, okay, so have you had any? And he would ask me about like how I've been feeling, and how things look based on what the data has said. And then depending on what stage I was at in the pregnancy, so towards the end of the pregnancy, then he would check, like we'd go into a room where, you sit on the chair and your legs go up and everything, and they check for dilation and see if you've dilated at all, or they'll check if you have any kind of swelling or pain, things like that, ultrasounds. So that was sort of the process from start to finish. And usually as well, they would have, once your belly is big enough to have an ultrasound on the outside instead of an inside ultrasound, that process would be done in a completely separate area of the hospital, where they have the big monitors and everything like that. And I would go there first and then go to my doctor. But yeah, the doctor was the same all the whole way through, until I actually gave birth, in which case it was a different doctor.
Was that difficult?
I actually preferred the doctor who was there on the day that I gave birth, so it was okay for me. Yeah. Although you do wait for a while when you go to a hospital, I think, versus a clinic or something. You do find you're waiting in the room with lots of other, pregnant women. And I would say a minimum of 2 hours I was in the hospital every time. So definitely take something with you to occupy your time.
Yeah, one night, or it usually takes a long time here. And 2 hours, I feel it's not even that much.
Yeah, true, exactly. So.
And was there also the possibility to discuss like a birth plan? And if so, how do they react to your birth plan? And did you ask a lot of questions while you had your checkups, or?
Yeah, so when you see the doctor, mainly that's when you can ask your questions and things. And they gave me a birth plan sheet with about 5 questions, and I thought about it, a lot, what I wanted to have and what I would, obviously, you don't know how birth is going to go, but, to have an idea of what you would like, what you prefer, how you would like your doctors to help you if you need anything on the day, or, what sort of interventions you don't want to have. That's, in my opinion, it's important to write that on your birth plan. So I was writing that down, and I took it into the hospital, and I'm like, okay, I would like to talk about this. And my doctor was like, okay. He took the piece of paper and he scanned it and was like, okay, that's it. And I'm like, don't you want to talk about any of this? So I was a bit, at first I was surprised. I was like, oh, okay, that's how he takes it. And so what I did was, that session was over, but the next time I went back for a checkup, I brought my birth plan with me again, and I said I would just like to go through this with you because it's very important to me. And so I pulled it out again, and I said, I do want to make sure, and I pointed out the bits that were specifically important to me. Like, I really wanted to avoid a C-section, episiotomy, and other interventions as much as possible, just because I didn't want to have, I know healing from those kinds of things can be very stressful on the body and things like that. So I wanted to avoid it if I could. And so I wanted to make sure with him, because I find as well with hospitals, the likeliness that you get certain interventions, sometimes certain doctors will say, oh yes, we do a C-section as soon as things slow down. And I'm like, no, give it time. I believe it will happen. And if the baby's happy and I'm happy, don't give me a C-section. But if there's an issue, then you can give me a C-section, So I just wanted to make sure they understood where I was in my mindset and how I wanted it to go. And, I do think Japanese people are quite quiet and reserved, and they don't say things directly usually. So it can be a bit intimidating for them as well as you to be very forward about what you would like. But I don't think you should have to give up on your, on the way you would like it to happen, just because that's not how it's done here, So definitely advocating for yourself is important, and making sure that they're listening is important as well, which obviously can be difficult if you don't speak Japanese. So I was glad that I did make that point with my doctor, and he then would write it on the computer, which lets everybody else in the, all the doctors and midwives know what my preferences are.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't give up on your birth plan, just didn't pay attention at the first time.
Yeah.
And for me, I think, and it's for many other women like this too, the more you educate yourself about giving birth, the more your birth plan gets important. And
yes, absolutely.
And then I can totally relate when you go with this paper that you need to be thought through and prepared, and you go to the hospital and they don't pay attention at all to what is so important to you. So I would just like repeat what you did. So you just, the next time you went, you took the birth plan again and you pointed out the points that were specifically important for you. And but at the same time, because you said the communication, or what I understood, the Japanese communication is not quite as it is in the West, so more forward. But maybe you have to read between the lines or even talk between the lines. So can you maybe give us some more, or an example, or explain how you did it when you didn't say straightforward what you wanted, but at the same time it was so important to say it. So how can we cope with this situation?
Yes, I do find that particularly when you're educating yourself, obviously I'm not a doctor, he is, so he has a lot of experience, but at the same time, I believe that we as, mothers to be, or already mothers, we know what our body is like. We also know ourselves best. So when you are approaching doctors about things that are their field, this is what they do for a living, it can feel a bit, oh, I shouldn't question the doctor. And especially in Japan with their hierarchy, doctors are, top of the hierarchy. So it can feel very much like, oh, I can't question them. I shouldn't be able to. And whereas in the West, we have much more, you can question it. You absolutely have every right to question it. But yeah, in Japan, it's just a little bit more hesitancy with that. So I find the best way to approach it is to have more of a help them, I guess, in a way, to see the logic of your thinking, just so that they can also see it from your point of view. So, for instance, what I would say about the C-section is I would ask them, at this hospital, at your hospital, what is the rate of C-sections? Like, how often do you perform them? And at what stage, like, do you usually perform them as soon as the baby's heart rate drops, or do you usually perform them if the mother looks like she's slowing down in labor? And I just I bring up the terms and the situations that they work with, and I say, at what stage do you do this? And then I say, okay, based on what you've told me, this is where I would like to be. So it has to be at this level before I'll be happy to accept that intervention. And if that makes sense.
A lot of sense.
Yeah. So that's how I would approach the different areas of my questions, or advocating for my preferences. And then he seemed to understand that better than me just saying, I want to avoid this, you need to help me. So yeah, and I think being a lot more just gentle in your demeanor and your I find in the West as well, when we state things, even if we are completely, just being honest, where we don't have any ill intentions whatsoever, but sometimes it can come across a bit, oh, wow, are you getting angry with me or something? Like it might be a bit seem to be on the offensive. But I think if Japanese people like a very gentle, subtle, approach. So I think if you approach it in that way, and we try and still looking for their affirmation, but at the same time stating what you would like and what you expect, because it is your birth, it is your pregnancy, and they're helping you with that experience. You're not sick, you don't have an illness, so you absolutely have every right to ask that, and they will listen.
Yeah. Oh, Alice, thank you for sharing your coping strategies with Japanese doctors. Yeah, I don't know if I told you beforehand, but in Germany, I am an intercultural trainer. And so all the communication with West and East is actually the main, let's say, mostly the main difference, how people talk to each other. And this straightforward, which we also, I think that's how we communicate mostly in Germany.
Yeah.
I think it's easily to offend people when you talk that way here in Japan. So especially when doctors here in Japan are pretty high in the hierarchy, you wouldn't get your point if you do it that way because you would probably offend them.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't get received as well by them because they feel they're being attacked, or well, not, that's probably a bit strong of a word, but yeah, it's just not how they have learned to communicate. And I think it does require much more gentle sort of long way around to sometimes get your point across, which can be sometimes for Westerners can feel a little bit frustrating. You just want to, get in and out and say what it is, but I find if you want to cooperate well and you've decided to have your baby in Japan, then there are certain, you know, parts of Japanese society that it would be easier for you and for them to accept that that's how they are and work with it.
Yeah, definitely. And also the point you mentioned about speaking in their terms. So not just saying I want this and this, but like asking more detailed question at how many cesarean do you usually do? I don't know, when you have 10 births, how many cesarean or do you proceed? And at what point, so it's very, very detailed question. And so I think that's, like you said, that's the terms and what they are thinking. It's easier for them to answer those questions. If you might only say, maybe I'm really afraid, I mean, maybe they can't really see how they can help you.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I would like to ask you about your pregnancy in general. Did you have any concerns? Did it go smooth? Was it a happy time? How did
I
you
think
experience
I
it?
was quite lucky, I think, with my experience. Generally, overall, I would say it was a very positive and enjoyable experience. I did have very bad morning sickness for all day, every day for the first, 4 or 5 months of the pregnancy. So I was literally just lying on the bed and barely eating anything and throwing up occasionally. And, just I would rock myself back and forth, just to try and get rid of this feeling. But as soon as that went away, it was just a wonderful experience. And I didn't realize how, because obviously everybody puts on weight differently and can eat different things, or other things make them feel queasy when they eat. And I just found generally once the morning sickness went away, I didn't have any complications. Like some people might experience preeclampsia or those other pregnancy-related complications, and I didn't have any of that. Or particularly strong food aversions, I didn't have any of those either. And I found my stomach as well wasn't getting, huge massively quickly. So that can be towards the end of pregnancy, some people can be very uncomfortable because their baby bump is very big, or they're just, the balance is thrown out. So they feel very off, and they can't walk because it hurts their knees or something. But I thought I was very lucky. I didn't have any of that. I enjoyed going for walks every day, and still obviously researching a lot about the baby's progress and development, and then also my own. And but my number one concern just was that in terms of the birth itself, I didn't want to be induced. So as I got to week 40 and my doctor started talking about being induced, he's like, we're going to induce you at week 41 right on the dot. And I just thought, if I'm fine, baby's fine, what's the rush, give it a bit more time. But thankfully, my little girl decided to come at 40 weeks and 4 days, so I didn't have to get to that stage. But that was probably a worry that was on my mind for a little while.
And do you think, because luckily you were not induced and she came just before, do you think there was anything you did that might have helped getting the process going?
I I think obviously a baby will come on their own time. That's what I believe. Oh, and she's awake. But I did go for a long walks of the few days beforehand, like an hour walk, and just strolling, nothing fast or anything like that. And I do think just keeping your body moving. I did try all of the eating dates and stuff that they say to have before you go into labor to help things along, and so I did all of that as well. I can't say exactly what helped, but in my mind the thing that helped most was probably just keeping active and healthy, and then the baby will come when she's ready.
Thank you. Please take us through your labor. How did it start, and at what point did you go to the hospital?
Okay, well, it sort of started I wasn't expecting anything that day. It was a very normal day, and we'd gone to bed later than usual, though, like midnight or something. And then about an hour later, I just started feeling something that was a bit different. And I thought, oh, this could be it, but maybe not. But, I'll just see how it goes. And then all of a sudden, it was kind of like, oh, wow, this is definitely contractions. And they were coming really fast, which I hadn't expected. And everybody usually says that, first time mums take a long time. And so I was prepared for that. That's what I had, set in my head. I'm just going to take it slow. And, I was prepared to stay at home for a long period of time before going to the hospital and everything. And anyway, so they started and they were coming really fast, like 2-minute intervals. And I'm thinking, it should be longer gaps than this. This is ridiculous, because, I started timing them and it was like 1 minute, 50 seconds. I'm like, oh my goodness. And so then that started happening, and I was just timing them for maybe 20 minutes, and it just continued like that. And then I kept needing to go to the bathroom, and I kept needing to throw up every 10 minutes or so. And I said to my husband originally, just sleep, because we don't know how long this is going to go for. But then I was like, no, I need you to wake up and help. So I woke him up, and then we sort of went to the hospital. I think it was about an hour or so after it had started. And I asked my husband, I said, I think we're going to have to call the hospital, because, this is coming a lot quicker than I thought. And, we should probably call them. So we called a taxi, and because the hospital's so close, it only took like 2 minutes in the taxi. So that was good. And that was one thing I'm really glad that I chose a hospital that was so close, because I didn't realize my labor would be so fast.
But he wasn't on duty, your husband, that day or that night?
No, it was actually, I think it was a holiday of a couple of days in Japan. So he was actually off work at that time.
But anyways, he's in a different, do you call it department, division? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay. Different area altogether.
Yeah. So you went to the hospital?
Yes.
After a quick ride.
Yes.
I guess the ride to the hospital was okay, since it was just 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was really, really quick, and didn't need to do anything really. It was just kind of like, okay, we're here. Yes, quick, get out of the car.
Could you at that point walk around freely, or were you taking some position that felt very comfortable for you, or were there some interventions? What happened next?
Yeah, it was kind of like when we arrived at the hospital, because it was, the middle of the night and there was not many people around. My husband sort of registered me first, and I'm sitting there waiting for him to register me, and I'm like throwing up, and they gave me a little bag to throw up into, so I'm like, and it was green of all colors. Like, why is this green? Anyway, and then I'm just waiting, and I'm like hunched over and stuff, and then I wanted to, in my sort of birth plan and everything as well, I had said, I want to be able to move around. I want to, just take whatever position feels best to me. I don't want to be stuck to a bed. So I'd made that very clear in my birth plan. And so when I got to the labour and delivery room, my husband left and went back home, and they actually wheeled me in a wheelchair into the delivery room. And then the nurse left. She wheeled me into the room. I stood up and she left. And I went, oh, okay, what's going on? And then I went to the bathroom again because I needed to. And then when she came back, she said, hop on the bed. And I was already, at the stage where I thought, they checked me and I was 3 centimeters dilated. So things were moving quickly. And I thought, well, I'm not, I'm fine not to move around right now. It hurts and I'm going to sit on the bed because that feels comfortable for me. So it wasn't necessarily just because they said so. And then I hopped on the bed. They checked me again, and I was dilated to 6 centimeters. So it was just kept going and kept going. And then I had no idea if my water broke. I didn't feel anything in that way of things. And then they started putting the monitors on and stuff. And then that's when they realized that the baby's heart rate was a bit sort of low, and her oxygen was also low. So they hooked me up to a drip, and they gave me an oxygen mask. And then before I knew it, I was at 10 centimeters. So I went from like 0 to 10 in an hour. And and then they just sort of, I had my eyes closed because that's how I was, coping with everything. And then I opened my eyes and I was like, oh, wow. And there was, 10 people in my room. It went from 0 or 1 to 10 people. And they were like, okay, she's coming soon. She's going to be here in a minute. So I was, what? So that was just so fast. And I was like, okay.
Okay, I'm ready. Okay.
Yeah, so just like breathe. And then I was just, because I practiced breathing. So I was just, slow breaths in and slow breaths out. And that helped enormously. So I definitely think practicing slow breathing or whatever, there are a couple of different breathing techniques, but whatever works for you at the time, I think definitely having practiced that is a really good idea. And I think that's why I dealt with it so well as well, because I didn't feel at any point that I was losing it, and I've heard, some stories of people saying I just couldn't handle it anymore. And although I suppose I didn't have a very long time to deal with it, so that was another part of it probably. But then the doctor came in who was going to deliver the baby, and he was different to the doctor that I had through all of my checkups. And he seemed very efficient. He was constantly communicating with me about my birth plan and stuff as well, what I had said that I wanted, and if he could, if he would need to do anything that wasn't on that, then he would let me know. So I didn't want an episiotomy, but he informed me that I needed one because they had to get her out quickly. So he asked if that was okay. I said yes, and then he did it. And it was good though. He did tell me that if I hadn't dilated so quickly and, there was so much pressure on my stomach, then it would have been a C-section, which I really didn't really want to have. So I was glad to avoid that, just because personally that wasn't something I wanted to deal with. And and then all of a sudden he was, just like, okay, push. And then I think it was three pushes, and they had to use a suction to pull her out because she wasn't coming down. But they got her out. I had my eyes closed still, and I didn't see her originally when she came out because I still had my eyes closed. But they told me that she was blue afterwards because of the oxygen stuff. And then I didn't hear her cry. There was no noise when she came out. Like, I felt her and I'm expecting this cry and I'm waiting for it, and there was nothing. And I'm like, okay, she's out. And then they take her over to the side where all of the baby stuff is. And then maybe after about 10 minutes or so, I heard this brief little cry just for a second. I thought, oh, she's breathing. But then I had my placenta was stuck inside. And so I know. And then the doctor said, well, we got to get it out because you're closing now. Your cervix is closing very quickly. It opened quickly, now it's closing quickly, and we don't want it to get stuck inside. So I'm going to have to pull it out. And he informed me of this, and I said, okay. And so then he had to put his hand in and pull it out. It took a couple of tries. So that actually was probably more intense than actually having the baby. And, all through this, they told me, don't run away from the pain. It's all good. Just breathe through it. And so that's what I did. And he pulled it out. And while they were dealing with Melody, they were doing all that with me. So I wasn't able to focus too much on Melody. Like, I didn't really get to look over at her or see her. And I had put in my birth plan as well that I wanted as much time with her as I could during this whole experience. And but obviously, you know, with all those things I couldn't. And then he was got to stitch me up inside and outside, because I had sort of like a 3rd degree tear, I think it would be, where it, you know, almost goes all the way, and obviously with the episiotomy as well. And then, before they stitched me up, they brought Melody over to me briefly once she was breathing again, and you know, they held her beside my head all wrapped up and stuff. And I wanted to hold her, I wanted to feed her and everything, but they just said because of the levels that she's at, we'll take her to the neonatal intensive care unit. And so I said okay, and then they took her away, and then I was still in the labour and delivery room for quite a while. Usually at that hospital, you're only allowed in the labour and delivery room for about 3 hours after the baby's born, and you stay with, usually the baby stays with you, and you can do like that sort of kangaroo care, keeping together, feeding, that kind of thing. But I lost a lot of blood as well, so they kept me in there for a while. And and then they stitched me up, and they took her to the neonatal unit. So I only got to see her for about 5 minutes, and then she was gone, and I didn't get to see her again until the next day. And my husband came and visited me briefly in the labour and delivery room, because he was a doctor there, so he was allowed in, but because of COVID, usually you're not allowed in. And then he was there for a little bit, and he got to go see her in the NICU as well, which was nice. But yeah, the first 3 days when she was in there, I didn't get to see her very much. Sorry, I rambled on a little bit.
No. I just thought of like 10 questions. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Sorry.
You dilated like from 0 to 10 centimeters in 1 hour, right? Or like when you came to the hospital, you were dilated 3 centimeters, right?
3, yeah.
And then within an hour, she was born, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy.
That is for like first time.
Yeah, like it took 3 hours altogether. My labor was only 3 hours long, so not long at all.
How did you feel? Like, because you said you weren't expecting that. Usually we hear it takes a lot longer. Were you positively surprised, or were you just okay in this moment, or how did you feel?
I think it was kind of like, because I did know that my mum also had a very fast birth when she had me, because I'm her first child as well. And I think hers was also 3 hours. So they do say that it can be quite genetic, that you can, you know, have the same sort of, you know, whether you're fast or slow as your mum. But, you know, I had it at least prepared for a longer one. Most people seem to go that way. So I was pretty okay with it, and I think there are benefits and, you know, downsides to both having a long labour and a short one. Obviously, a short one comes with all of the, you know, quick, we've got to do this, decisions, you know, you don't have much time to absorb the experience, you don't have much time to make any sort of decisions that you haven't, you know, if you haven't. That's why I also think if I hadn't thought out my birth plan as well, I wouldn't have had time to, you know, decide if this was okay with me or anything like that. So it wasn't what I had envisioned it would be, and, you know, what I prepared for necessarily. But I think everything that I had done in advance made it a very positive experience, and I don't regret anything.
Awesome to hear. So when you say preparing for it, you mean like different scenarios, or also the breathing techniques that you mentioned and all that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I admire you. You still, even though it sounded a little bit hectic, but maybe it wasn't hectic. I don't know. But then you still thought about, okay, I have to kind of stay calm and breathe and, you know, go with the flow, as I like to say.
Exactly. Yeah, go with the flow.
And well, you planned like a very unmedicated natural birth, and at that moment it wasn't possible. And I think it's great how you deal with the situation, and that you weren't panicking about it, that you were accepting, okay, it is what it is. I planned it differently, but it's okay, you know. And if you stay calm, and when you also have a possibility to communicate with the doctors how you did, I think it's the key, you know, the communication, and you are part of all this, and it's not being done to you.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I think that makes a huge difference. So you feel like you have the control over your own birth experience. Definitely makes a difference if you feel, happy with it afterwards, or satisfied with how it went, even though it is always unpredictable.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. And then you made me think of, because you said your mom also had a very quick labor, and it's actually at the birth center they asked me too, how long was your mom's labor, well, with you? And I thought, wow, they never asked me this in any hospitals before. And then I did some research, and I found out about more about the day I was born and how it was. It was a whole lot different than it was for me and my daughter. But I mean, it's good to learn more about it too.
Yes, absolutely. I think it helps too. And to talk to your mum about it as well can be like, what was it like for them, and gives you a little bit of an idea.
Yeah. You didn't see Melody for 3 days, or just a little bit,
Yeah,
a
just
few
a little bit.
hours, or?
Yeah, like she was born on the 20th, and then I saw her the next day briefly, and then I think once a day from then on for 3 days, but yeah, only for a very brief period of maybe 30 minutes to an hour.
And that was because, was it a general rule that you can go in there, or was it because it was more restricted because of COVID, or?
Yeah, it was more restricted because of COVID. I think you do kind of have to tell or ask the nurses at the NICU when you want to go in there, so that they don't have, too many people in there at once, as a general rule. But because of COVID, it was particularly restricted to only, a short period of time, which was unfortunate, but, that's how it was.
Yes. And how did you deal then with breastfeeding?
I was actually a bit nervous about that at the beginning, because I was very much wanting to just breastfeed purely. I didn't want to do formula. That's only because, bottles and heating it up to the right temperature and doing all of that sort of stuff was just too overwhelming for me. I just thought breastfeeding is the easiest way for me to go. So that's why I chose that. And I was sort of worried that if I wasn't able to do that from the beginning, then they were giving her a bottle because I, wasn't with her. And I feared that she would get used to the bottle and how easy it is to get the milk out versus trying to breastfeed. And then so I was worrying it was creating issues for me down the line. But actually, it took, when I went to the NICU to see her for the second time after she was out of the incubator thingy, then I was able to breastfeed it. She cried and cried, and it took a little while, but she didn't really breastfeed at all that day. But the following day, she sort of started to pick it up, and I wasn't too worried about it anymore. I had learned when I was, researching lots of things about breastfeeding as well, that, a lot of people can have a really hard time with breastfeeding at the beginning. The baby doesn't latch, or doesn't latch properly, or it hurts the mother, or they get sore nipples and it just doesn't work. And, so I was prepared for all of those things as well. And I just, relaxing is a big part of it, because your baby can feel when you're relaxed or stressed. And so I was just, okay, just relax about it. It's not a big deal. She'll get there kind of attitude. And she did. And thankfully, I have had absolutely no issues with breastfeeding or at anything through my whole journey. I'm still breastfeeding now, and she's almost 9 months.
Wow. Good job. This what happened to me, actually. I think I was too stressed after birth, and I think I should have prepared more for breastfeeding and what I can do and what kind of possibilities I have. But I was so, let's say, busy and preparing everything for, the state of being pregnant at the moment and also for giving birth that I didn't take almost any time for the time after giving birth. And I think that would have been important too, to do some research for the time afterwards, because I was kind of shocked afterwards. Yeah, and I wasn't relaxed, and I actually had troubles too breastfeeding, but it worked out after some time, but it really took a while.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. I mean, it does seem everybody focuses, on the pregnancy and the birth, and then it's like, oh, well, what happens after that? It's like, and a lot of the support as well often goes for pregnant women. There's lots of classes to do, prenatal yoga and like, the breathing practicing and everything. But not many people think, it's so much harder, in my opinion, after the baby's born. There's so many more things to deal with, and especially if it's your first, it's just like so overwhelming. I remember feeling so overwhelmed with a lot of things that, definitely, I think focusing on that when you're doing your pregnancy and birth research, definitely doing breastfeeding and after birth research is also important.
I should have done that. But okay,
Right.
Constantly learning something new. Is there something or some YouTube channel or some book in particular you can recommend, or anything that marked you?
I listened to a lot of audiobooks about it, but I mostly just watched the YouTube videos of two channels that I really liked, with the Sarah Levon of Bundlebirth and Bridget Taylor. Yeah, they do cover after birth as well as pregnancy and everything. So that is where I got a lot of my, inspiration from, and a lot of my, I was going to say knowledge, but it's not, I'm still lacking a lot of knowledge, but, they're the main areas I got mine from.
Yeah. See, I think I skipped these videos about postpartum.
Yeah.
How long did you stay in a hospital?
It was actually the policy of the hospital to be there for 6 days. I originally was quite, I don't want to be in the hospital for 6 days. It's such a long time. I want to go home. I want to be with my family. And, in Australia, it's pretty quick. You're sort of in, you have the baby, and if it's not a C-section or any complications, you're out pretty quick, sometimes within 24 hours. So that's kind of what I was expecting. And I thought, my husband's home and he's not allowed to come see me because of COVID. I don't really want to spend 6 days without seeing my husband and him not being able to visit the baby, and, just things like that so much. So I kept asking my doctor, can I shorten the stay? And he said, well, you can, but kind of thing. And eventually I decided to keep it 6 days. And I'm glad I did, because even though, my husband wasn't able to come very often because he's a doctor there, which is why we chose the hospital, he was able to come occasionally. And, then having food made for you and everything for a breakfast, lunch and dinner was such a, because like I said, it's very overwhelming in that first few days after birth. So having all of that brought to you is very helpful. And if you can get those 6 days or that brief period of time after birth to have people help you with those things, it's definitely worthwhile. I don't know why I was pushing so hard to shorten it.
Yeah, same. It's the same in Germany. I think after 2-3 days you are out of there. But it's something special about Japan, because I heard all the time it's actually most of the time the same story, that ladies let's say from the Western countries don't want to stay in the hospital because probably of their experience from home. But then when they stay, the same as me, I even stayed a day longer. they like it, they are taken care of. You can ask all the questions. They take your baby if you don't have the energy or if you want to just relax. Did you have good food too?
Yeah, the food was quite good. Definitely better than Australian hospital food.
Same with Germany. Yeah, so we just had really good food, and actually then when I came back home, I was just exhausted with everything, and I said I was even looking at the birth center if I can go back, and you can actually go back and stay there more time, but it's also very
nice.
pricey. But there's this possibility.
Yeah.
Okay, we talked about checkups. We talked about your labor and about your postpartum and how you deal with breastfeeding. Can I ask you, how much did you pay at the hospital? That might be also an interesting question for other women.
Yeah. So the hospital was first. It had divided into rooms of 4 people to a room, or I think there was also 2 people to a room, but I didn't see those rooms, and I'm not sure how much they cost. Or there was the private room. And I think also if COVID wasn't there, then you could also have your husband stay with you in the private room, but obviously in the 4 people room you can't. So depending on which room you choose, obviously the price will change. And I just chose the 4 people room, so that is no extra cost on top of the original birthing cost, having a baby in Japan, kind of being in a hospital. And then the amount was, I'm trying to remember, hang on, where is it? I can't find it. Here we go. Okay, so the cost for the total was about 420,000 yen. And then the Japanese government actually pays for a part of it. So they'll cover about 1/3 of that cost. So depending on what hospital you go to, they'll cover 1/3 of whatever that hospital charges. And so we only ended up having to pay about 280,000 yen.
Which is
just over half.
Yeah, it's really not that much. I think, the Japanese government pays, depending on how much it costs in your hospital, it will pay a part of it. And, but for example, at Aiko, it can be like 1 million, for example, 1 million yen. And the maximum the Japanese government pays is 420,000 yen. Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah.
It depends. Yeah. What
exactly.
you pay.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Good to know. They help.
Yeah. Exactly. They help.
Okay. Now, when we come slowly to an end, what do you think was the most challenging part for you during pregnancy or labor?
The most challenging part during pregnancy was definitely the morning sickness. That lasted for me for about 4 months or so, which was terrible. I was literally in bed all day, every day for the entire 4 months. I could barely eat anything. And, I really just wanted plain things. I would get, plain chips, crisps, and just eat those, or sometimes fruit. I really was craving watermelon, but the time of year meant there was no watermelon, and I was like, oh, I can't eat watermelon. There's none around. And I kept looking for it. And my mother-in-law eventually, I'd already got past the craving, unfortunately, but she was constantly on the lookout for a watermelon for me. And she went and bought me this really expensive watermelon, because fruits in Japan are very expensive. So she went and bought me one, and thank you, but I didn't have the craving anymore. So that was unfortunate. But so that was probably the most difficult part during pregnancy, was this morning sickness. But once that was over, it was fantastic. I loved it. And then for the labor as well, just making sure that I had, when I was writing my birth plan, just making sure that I had an idea of how I wanted it to go. And, if the pregnancy doesn't go, if the birth doesn't go as you planned, then just to be okay with that experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good advice. So it sounds like you would go for a second baby, right?
Yes, so we're already making plans for a second baby. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I want to just repeat you. So you said you would recommend to other women if it doesn't go the way you wanted it, to just stay calm, relax, or how would you put it in your words?
Oh, yes. Oh, if I had to tell other women what, recommend other women what they would, a way of thinking that would be good, I suppose, is especially to just educate yourself. The more knowledge that you have about the whole experience, the more confident you can be in your decisions when you're just going through the motions of pregnancy and birth. And you always hear everybody's telling you, their opinions, their stories. And sometimes it's not only overwhelming, it's kind of scary. And so if you're confident in what you want, what you know, and what you're researching is also, when I say educating yourself too, I think finding resources like the ones that I suggested before, of those YouTube channels of certified people in those fields, then you know that your information is correct and not just going off what anybody says. I think that can help make you feel more confident, and also like, you understand that your body is built to do this, and you don't have to also, especially when you're in a foreign country, it can be particularly difficult to deal with what other people are saying. So just because that's how it's done in Japan doesn't mean you have to follow what everybody's telling you. You can, you have the knowledge, what would work for you.
Yes, correct. But how could other women, because you speak Japanese, how can other women do that? What do you think, if they don't speak Japanese, especially?
I mean, there's probably, if you've come over to Japan and you find that you're having a baby here, and you, oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm going to do, I can't speak Japanese, and your hospital, especially, there are some, hospitals that offer English speaking staff, but I actually was studying, or am studying, a sort of business where I would like to help women who can't speak Japanese, and to go to the checkups throughout pregnancy, or even depending on COVID, of course. But just I would like to offer support to women who don't speak Japanese and would like to communicate better with their doctors, because I do think communication between the doctor and yourself is very important to get the best experience for you. So that is something that I would like to offer.
Oh, wow, Alice. That's a fabulous offer.
Thank you.
So if somebody hears that now who needs some support, translation support regarding this matter, maybe for checkups or, mainly for checkups, right? Or
mainly for, I mean, at the moment, obviously, it would probably all be online and everything. So, but yes, mainly for checkups and things like that. Any questions that they have, obviously, I'm not a certified midwife or anything like that. So if they have support on that end of somebody, but they need help with, understanding how to work with the Japanese, within the Japanese hospital and society, and, how to communicate and advocate for themselves in a Japanese setting, they have any questions related to that, then that would be something that I could help with.
Yeah, like also translating, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
translating.
Okay.
Well. Yeah.
And what do you think? How much would you charge, or how much? What kind of options, or how should ladies contact you?
Well, I have an email address which I've given to you. So
I will put in the
and then
description.
So they can just contact me at that email address, and we can set up a Zoom to talk, and just for a 30-minute Zoom call. And I'm actually not charging anything for it at the moment, because it's a business that I would like to set up. I'm in the beginning stages, so I would like to see what the interest is like. If anybody, would like help in that area if it's something that people want. And if the demand is there, then I will start to create packages at different levels. But at the moment, I would like to offer the service for free.
Oh, couldn't be more perfect. What the occasion. Alice, if there are some ladies out there who also consider IVF and they want to exchange with somebody who was in a similar situation, would it be possible to contact you? And
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'd be happy to take any, sort of questions or exchange with people about IVF and Japanese mothers-in-law. And, if somebody's in that situation, I am as well. So if they need somebody to talk to about that, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Alice.
Oh, thank you. This is fun.
What a great interview. So many insights. And on top of that, even you offer your help.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I will probably come back to you with other questions on other topics.
Oh, thank you. I would look forward to it. Let me know anytime.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alice, for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.